One of the most common questions I get as a sex therapist is, why don't I want my partner the way that I used to? Or, we are great partners, but we've almost become roommates. How do we get the spark back? Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Dr. Holly, sex and relationship therapist. And in this video, I'm unpacking what really happens to sexual desire in long term relationships, why it fades, what the research says about keeping it alive, and how you can rebuild connection and pleasure without it feeling forced or fake. And stick around because by the end, I'll share one mindset shift that changes everything about how couples experience desire. It's the same one that has helped hundreds of my clients reignite passion even after years of feeling stuck. Let's start with something a little uncomfortable. Desire doesn't just disappear, it evolves. When you first fall in love, your brain is flooded with dopamine, novelty, and mystery. You're discovering something new, and that curiosity fuels attraction. But over time, as you build safety, routine, and trust, everything that makes a relationship last, those same qualities can make sex feel, well, predictable. This is what Esther Perel calls the paradox of desire. Love thrives in closeness, while desire needs a little distance. Kind of like a flame needs oxygen in order to thrive, and if there's too much closeness on top of that flame, it can snuff the flame right out. We crave security and adventure at the same time. Burrell says it best: love wants to have, desire wants to want. So when couples tell me we're closer than ever, but the spark is gone, that's not a sign that something's broken. It's a sign that you've mastered closeness but neglected eroticism. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to play games or create artificial distance. It just means that that part of you that once saw your partner as a fascinating mystery now mostly sees them as your co parent, your business partner, your roommate, or your best friend. Desire needs you to see them again through that lens of curiosity. And we'll get there, but first, let's talk about why this shift is so common. A lot of people assume sexual desire is like hunger, you either feel it or you don't, but that's actually not how desire works. Research shows us that desire isn't a biological drive like thirst or hunger, and you won't die without sex. It's more like an incentive system where your brain needs a reason to want sex, something that feels rewarding. And when life piles on stress, exhaustion, or resentment, that incentive fades. One of my favorite models comes from researchers at the Kinsey Institute, and they describe arousal as having two systems: an accelerator and a brake. The accelerator picks up on things that turn you on, like touch, smell, fantasy, playfulness, and the brake notices anything that might be a threat: stress, body image worries, feeling disconnected, or even just being too tired. So, if you're feeling low desire, it's rarely because your accelerator's broken, and it's usually because your brake is slammed. When you understand that, it can shift everything. And instead of asking, why am I not turned on, you can start by asking, what's hitting my brake right now? For some people, it's stress or exhaustion, and for others, it's resentment, routine, or lack of emotional connection. Desire can't grow in contexts where your nervous system doesn't feel relaxed, safe, or valued. Now, here's the part that surprises a lot of couples. Not everyone experiences desire the same way. We've been taught that desire should strike out of nowhere, that spontaneous, movie scene kind of lust. But for some people, especially in long term relationships, desire doesn't show up first. It shows up after arousal begins. This is called responsive desire, a concept introduced by researcher Rosemary Besson. She found that many people don't feel in the mood until they've started engaging in something sensual, like kissing, touching, or simply relaxing together. In other words, you don't always feel desire before you start. Sometimes you have to start in order to feel desire, and that's totally normal. In fact, when couples learn to accept that, it removes so much shame. It's not about wanting for desire to magically appear, it's about creating the conditions for it to grow. If you only have sex when you're spontaneously in the mood, you might be waiting a really long time. But if you set up moments of connections without pressure or without a performance goal, your body often will catch up and you'll end up having a really great time. Let me share an example. A couple I worked with came to me saying, we love each other, but it feels like we're roommates. There's just no spark. When I asked about their lives, I learned that they were both working full time, raising two kids, and collapsing into bed exhausted every night. Their date nights were usually Netflix and sleep. So instead of focusing on fixing desire, we focused on fixing context. They scheduled 30 minutes every other week for what we called connection time. No pressure for sex, just massages, talking, touch, anything that felt good and connecting. The first few times, nothing sexual happened, but by the third week, things started to shift. One partner said, "Once I actually slowed down, I realized I did want him. I just never had the space to feel it." And that's responsive desire in action. And it's not just anecdotal. Study after study shows that couples who intentionally create time for intimacy, rather than waiting for the mood to strike, report higher satisfaction and more frequent sexual activity. So, if you've ever thought that planned sex isn't sexy, I challenge you to think about that. For example, does purchasing tickets to a concert in advance make the show any less exciting? And what if planning is actually proof that this matters to you? When we first start dating, everything is planned, right? The outfits, the time, the vibe. It's not spontaneous, it's intentional, and that's what makes it exciting. So, what if you took your relationship back to when you first started dating, as far as being really intentional about the time that you two spend together? But how do you keep desire alive over time? Now, there's no single formula, but there are some guiding principles that research and real couples agree on. The first is curiosity. Desire thrives on discovery. So ask yourself, when's the last time that I saw my partner doing something that made me think, wow, that's really hot? Maybe it's when they're confident at work, when they're laughing with friends, or when they're focused on a hobby. Or for me, when I saw my husband rotating the tires last week. Those are the moments when we see our partners as separate from us or just a little bit out of reach. And that's where attraction lives. The second is space. A little separateness can be sexy, and you don't need to play hard to get, but you do need to have a sense of self. When you nurture your own passions and confidence, you bring more vitality into the relationship. Desire is drawn to aliveness. The third principle is playfulness. The couples who report the best sex years into their relationship are the ones who keep a sense of humor and play. So try something new, not necessarily because you're bored, but because novelty wakes up the brain's reward system. Research shows that couples who do new, exciting activities together feel more attracted to each other afterward. It's that simple. And finally, communication. Couples who talk about their sexual needs and preferences have better sex. And notice I said better, not perfect. This means that you don't need a script or a TED talk to communicate perfectly. You just need to be open. Start small by saying things like, "I miss kissing you," or "I'd love to try this." And the more that you talk about sex and intimacy without shame, the easier it becomes to reconnect physically. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, this all sounds nice, but what if we're just mismatched? Every couple has differences in desire. What matters isn't the difference itself, it's how you navigate it. If one partner has higher desire, it's easier to fall into a pursuer withdrawer dynamic where one person is pushing and the other is pulling away. But when both people approach sex as something you create together, rather than something one person demands and the other grants, everything changes. You don't need to force yourself to have sex when you don't want to, but you can be open to moments of connection that might lead there. You can say things like, "I'm not sure if I'll want to, but I'd love to start cuddling and see how I feel." That's what healthy sexual generosity looks like, showing up with openness, not out of obligation. So let's come back to that mindset shift I promised you, the one that I said can transform your relationship. Desire isn't something that you have or lose, it's something you tend. It's not about waiting for the spark to reignite, it's about learning how to build it over and over again in new ways. Sometimes that means creating space and novelty, and sometimes it means slowing down and giving yourself permission to feel again. And sometimes it means recognizing that sex isn't a performance to get right, it's a conversation between two nervous systems, two bodies, two histories that are constantly changing. So, if you've been feeling disconnected or off, please hear this. There's nothing wrong with you and there's nothing broken. Desire just needs your attention, your curiosity, and your care. If you start there, the spark isn't gone, it's just waiting for air. Thanks for spending this time with me. If you found this video helpful, make sure to subscribe for more videos on sexual health and relationships. And if you want to learn more about how to hack your desire, check out the video that'll pop up on your screen next.